Hello, Graham. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm fine. Looking forward
How
to
is
Family and Friends Day.
Yeah,
Hello.
same. Hi, Amy.
Hello.
How's everyone doing? Sorry, I'm messing up all my controls.
We are fine.
Good. So, is there anything anyone wants to demo or discuss today?
Not really. I think just going through the blockers, and if there's any points that need to be discussed from the Europe American one, it's probably enough content, I think.
Sure. So I don't think there was too much from the Europe Americas. We were talking, well, every Jav may have a better update, but like Skarbek was working on fine tuning. Is there anything like Jav that you think we either like should expect Skarbek to need us to jump in on, or the other one is there anything like kind of as a team we should be thinking about more like future-y, bigger scale?
I don't think so. I haven't caught up with, well, I didn't catch up with Skarbek at the end of his day yesterday, so I don't know where we are, and I haven't really caught up this morning. So I'll take a look to see what is going on. I guess the issue for fine tuning, see if there's any updates on that.
Because the main thing I think we were talking about yesterday for you, Graham, was just that it's a little bit slow because Skarbek was saying like you make a change, wait and see what happens, follow up. So there could be that, it's sort of helpful to hand on, but I don't think it was especially like a problem. It was more just that the process is a little bit longer.
Because you really want, like, especially when you're looking at this, you probably want about 24 hours worth of data every time you make a change, realistically.
Exactly,
like you can extrapolate smaller bits, but it is good to get the kind of the rise and fall of traffic throughout the day to try and see how it pans out.
Exactly.
Yes. So the last change that I see changes the memory utilization percentage for Nginx. It changes it from 70% to 75%. Initially, we had that at 50%, and we were just seeing a large number of pods because Nginx appears to be memory bound, and it would get to be over 50%, and therefore, like the scaler would just create more pods, and we got up to the max number of pods, even though we weren't saturating the nodes. So that's up to 75%, and the resource requests for memory for Nginx also went up to 1 gigabyte. So I think that previously it was set to 500 megabytes. So we're doubling the memory requests and then increasing the memory utilization percentage. What we hope will happen after this is that it'll reduce the number of pods. This wasn't merged though. I made a comment last night asking to just do it on a single cluster first, but I think that might have been after maybe Skarbek just didn't have time to do that change. So I'll make that change this morning, and then we'll get this on a single cluster. I'd like to do all of these changes on single clusters if we can, because I think it'll be a good comparison, to see what the resource utilization looks like.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. And right, Henry, if there's, if you have time as well this morning to get involved in that, then also please do.
Yeah, I wanted to have a look at that anyway, more deeply. I mean, the one thing is that we need to test for sure what effects we see when we tune things. But on the other hand, I think we also had some questions and understanding of how the tuning Kubernetes is working. Like if you have two different metrics you use for scaling, like CPU and memory, how this is affecting each other, like if we could get a better understanding of how this is working in general, that maybe would also help in informing us what to do, maybe. So maybe some research would be also good in this regard.
Yeah, I don't know, Graham, if you know how target CPU utilization and target memory utilization play together? I assume that both, like, they're ANDed together so that they, both have to evaluate to be true, or the HBA tries to make both of them evaluate to be true, right?
Yeah, look, I'd have to go back and double check because it has been a while since I've looked at this stuff, but I believe what you're saying is correct. It's usually very simple rules like that, which is, yeah, it's just trying to make all those conditions true.
So what I imagine what will happen after we merge this change is that the number of pods will increase, the CPU utilization will rise, and we'll see whether we are still memory bound or CPU bound. It could be that we become CPU bound after this change because we're increasing the number of requests.
I know it's not a big deal, but it's something worth considering as well, as these Nginx pods are probably being run all over the place, right? Like they're being run on all, because they're not being bound to anything, right?
I think they're in the default pool only. Could be wrong.
Okay, well, sorry, let me rephrase. They could run anywhere, but we are fortunate enough that they're only running in default then.
That's
probably
possible.
because all our other nodes are tuned enough so that there's no room for them, essentially.
That's possible, yeah. Graham, just because I'm curious, what are you looking at right now? I haven't been really following things that closely.
Sure. Yeah, sure. No, that's so basically what I've been covering for the last few weeks is just I've had on-call closing stuff out from that, slowly burning down the residual stuff I've had from core infra, and a few corrective actions, assisting with the API migration, like working with Henry and Skarbek, kind of turning over that. And then basically I have been putting together more and more issues now and really just looking at the pieces for both trying to, make sure we've got at least issues and documentations of the things we want to address, protect it. And then I guess that's pretty much it, really, more or less.
Yeah, I forgot you were on call, so that probably took the majority of your time.
Yeah, and I've had a few issues, as I said, from core infra that I just needed to burn down. And then we had the GKE upgrade came out of nowhere, which I just kind of jumped in on to like, it wasn't even a lot of effort. It's just a lot of bookkeeping. The biggest change with the latest GKE upgrade is a bunch of metrics changes, which we do not actually need to action. So I've opened up issues for those. I've done most of the tooling change. And the ingress change stuff like that. We've basically, a lot of it was just bookkeeping and opening issues because the observability repo with Tanko's got a lot of references to the old specification, like plant UML and all these other random pieces need to be changed as well now. So,
but these are just deprecation warnings and not like
they
blockers,
are.
right?
So we've got till 1.22. So we've got 9 months, which is a lot amount of time, but also that is a short amount of time for these issues to sit on a backlog and then get forgotten about. So
yeah, sure. And do we have a corrective action for? And it's the second time I heard someone say like the upgrade came out of nowhere. And is it like really that it came out of nowhere, or is it something that we can get a heads up on?
It is something we can get a heads up on. It came, to be clear, I guess it came out of nowhere for us, but Google did display this information. Just we got no one actively reading it because it's a web page or an RSS feed, and I'm not sure anyone uses RSS feeds anymore. But okay, well there you go. Well, I can give you another one to add then.
I live by RSS. Well,
that's good. Yeah, well, there you go. The good news is and typical with Google stuff as well is they change it every few months. They change it, and so you look at something or you think you understand how it works or what's going to happen, and then they just silently update their documentation and change really important things, and you don't know until you look again. But the good news is they're sending pub sub events. So before they were sending pub sub events for us to consume when they were doing the upgrades, which is useful but not that useful. Now they're sending us pub sub events to say they're going to. So like 6 days or a week out, they'll say, hey, I'm going to do this. We're going to switch you over. The problem is my solution for consuming them at the moment is a small cloud function, which I made the decision to put them as Grafana annotations because the events I was consuming was this upgrade happened at this point in time. So I wanted to like make it clear in the data. But now that we are getting 2 types of messages and we probably want to send them to somewhere different or there's a lot more logic we need to do around that. So I've got an issue open that basically says, we have these pub sub events, we should consume them smarter and we should put the data somewhere better. I don't know if this is like, maybe this is something Woodhouse could do. I'm not sure if that's what Woodhouse's functionality kind of is, and I know it hasn't got the ability to do this stuff yet, but it would be great if we could it would be good to sit down and actually get that. So we get a very clear loud alert that say in 6 days, we're going to be updating to like 1.20 or something.
If it's RSS, maybe we can just hook Slack into it.
Yeah, I was just about to say.
But I think we already have that. There's a channel that we're the RSS.
There's a cloud provider alerts, but that's mostly the incident channels from cloud providers, and I don't watch it very closely because most of it's like Cloudflare in Buenos Aires is struggling.
Yeah, so there's GKE-feed, and that's where they're going at the moment, although maybe that's mostly security bulletins. But the problem is just going to Slack, it's just like a channel that updates every 3 or 4 days, and you just can't, like, you've got to look at every message on the website and pick out, okay, this is actually going to affect me.
See.
Which is why the pub sub messages are tailored to us, because they will say, this particular cluster is going to be upgraded soon with this version.
Yeah, I guess the ideal thing would be it would open an issue as soon as that notification was
exactly
sent. Yeah.
So as I said, I've got an issue open to like, what are we going to do about these? Because we do need to do it better.
Do you have the link for that, Graham? If you
sure.
have it to hand.
I put it in core infra simply because I don't know. I feel like core infra should be owning like GKE as a platform more, but I'm happy to move it anyway. Okay, where would you like me to drop the link?
Just in the service catalog, it's owned by delivery.
Okay, well, I'm happy to move it to delivery then.
I mean, that's not necessarily correct either, but that's what it said at the moment.
Okay, we should.
I don't mind. Yeah, just wherever it needs to go, I'll put it there. That's fine.
Cool. Okay, yeah. If you just link it over, then we can find a place.
I think we have a similar issue open for something which is not exactly the same, but for migration event notifications, right? So if a VM is about to get migrated or other maintenance events, we also get a notification much shorter ahead, like an hour or something, or even just a few minutes. But this is also an open issue, which is kind of related to, I don't think it makes sense to get alerted for this, but we should at least get a track of what's happening if we see degradations, right?
I wonder if we can get that as a pub sub message as well and see if we can, because you'd ideally want all these kind of messages coming to one queue, and then we can have like one piece of software that likes pulling that off and doing what needs to be done appropriately.
So maybe this can be put together somehow. Yeah, I will look out and see if I can find the issue.
See if you can find the issue and link it in. Yeah, thanks. We can review that. Andrew, is there anything? How's the observability looking?
So we got the API ingress monitoring with the correct stage labels in last week.
Oh,
and since then, so that's all done.
Data?
So yeah, if you go to, I can give you a quick demo, and then I'm going to have an ask. It's not very exciting, but it is monitoring, and things that are monitoring that aren't beeping all the time are good. So it's good. If you look over here, we should have, you can see there's a bunch of kube stuff here for the API. And if we go down, well, first of all, you can see here, we've got Nginx as an SLI. So this is the Kubernetes monitored Nginx. I just realized that this is a bit scant at the moment, so we could probably do with a bit of extra data in here and a bit of extra stuff. But I'll come to that in a minute. And then if you go down to saturation details for the Kubernetes service, we've actually still got the old VM-based stuff as well. We should probably take this out at some stage, like how many inodes are available on the VMs that run the API fleet, and that we will soon be getting rid of, I guess, once that becomes decommissioned.
Yeah, that's
and
in
so those are all
progress. Do you have an issue with that? Like, if not, I can open you one.
Yeah, open an issue. I mean, it'll be very quick. It'll be like a one-line JSON change. Yeah. So, but you're welcome to add that in. And then this is kind of what the thing where I was banging on about the labels, because now you can see. So this is HPA desired replicas, and this is telling us that, you know, out of whatever 100% is, we are currently running at 36% of the desired replicas. So if we look over this, sorry, my computer, there we go. Let's give this a 24-hour range. Yeah, we have sort of a single line config, which in JSON now for saturation metrics, which is like, these things are only in VMs. And then as soon as you add API to that, all of the stuff that's only in not VMs, well, you know, all the VM saturation metrics will just disappear. So this is 20. I mean, that's actually remarkably unexciting. And that to me tells me that our autoscaler is probably in need of some work, because if you look at our traffic volume over that period, it goes, you know, we've got that real sinusoidal wave, and we have like absolutely no sinusoidal wave in our desired replicas at all, which to me, I mean, I'm not 100% on that, but I mean, there's lots of signals that are a little bit off on this, but yeah, it's remarkable how flat that is. My other question is, do we want to spend a whole bunch of time tuning this with the very, very coarse levers that are desired CPU and desired memory, or do we want to wait until we get Prometheus custom metrics for the autoscaler, and then spend the time doing it really well with that? Because, you know, CPU is a pretty coarse stick to beat that with, in my opinion. Like, we can do better with custom metrics.
How far are we out from having those?
As far as I know, everyone talks about it as a nice to have, but I would like to see it, but I don't know what the technical complexities of doing it are. I know it's all the Helm charts that need to be updated, right?
So I thought we couldn't do it. I thought, now this could be completely inaccurate. We needed 119 of Kubernetes as first to have HPAs that could even support custom metrics. So I thought that was like a blocker at some point. Like maybe back when this was first discussed, it was like, oh,
I didn't realize it was that. I didn't realize it was that late in the Kubernetes versions that it came in.
I think so. Yeah, look, I could be wrong, but I just have this feeling we were like, oh no, we had to wait for some future version for something. But I should go back and check that.
And I guess that probably complicates things with Helm, because we have a minimum supported version on that as well.
Well, we're on 119 now, so as of like 2 weeks ago. So I think we're across that threshold, but I think that also could be why we didn't do this earlier, because we're like, oh, we needed. Maybe it was only I think the Kubernetes supported or the HPA supported it earlier, but k8s said they weren't going to like put it, you know, basically they take all these upstream components, and then, you know, when they land in GKE is like they have their own time frame. But yeah, but I will double check this, because I am now curious. But in theory, now all the pieces in place that we should be able to do it. There shouldn't be any blockers from the platform level of doing that.
Okay, awesome. Look, this is just a side note, but I mean, look at this. I've just asked. Oh, I asked for 30 days. That was actually. I mean, even then, it should be able to display this in 30 days. But Thanos, Thanos is in need of some love as well, but that's another discussion. Sorry, you were going to say something, Amy. I interrupted you.
I was just going to say that I'm pretty sure Skarbek is thinking of doing a sort of good enough tuning now, based on the fact we're quite over provisioned, and then I'm sure, yeah, later on we'll have to do our full review, and maybe that's when the custom like scaling stuff comes in.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, even that. Look, is Thanos down? Anyway. So yeah, we've got that, and then I've just noticed here we should have the cube. So this is API main stage. I bet you that that's not labeled properly. But if we go back to, I know that the canary stage was labeled properly, and so we should see the canary stage here. Now it's hard to tell if this is my computer or Thanos. So, oh, I think it's my computer. So I'm just going to change this over to the canary stage. Maybe. Yeah. And then here we should see this tracking and we need to figure out why we're not seeing it for main stage, but it was added after that work was done. So I'm guessing that the setup to connect that node pool to say like this node pool is running the API main stage, that work wasn't done. And I'm hoping if Thanos returns anything that we see this metric here, but it looks like Thanos has decided that it's calling it a day.
So I just double checked what I was talking about earlier. So I'm wrong, but I figured this is worth pointing into the discussion as well. So what we've just got now with the upgrade to 119 is multi-dimensional pod auto scaling. So there's a lot of, there's documentation here on it, but basically you can go down to scaling by number of pods, but also scaling the limits and requests and all those settings to be adjusted on the pods dynamically as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's what they're trying to push towards. Like Google have got the whole page on it, but that's okay. Now they put that in beta now for 119. And basically, how it works is it looks like it's a GKE specific functionality, or at least their version of it, because it's, I guess it might be tied to their platform. So we can do, if this is something we're interested in, we can do this by just dropping CRDs into the GitLab Extra. Like we don't need upstream Helm chart work. We can do this ourselves by dropping the objects just directly into our extra deployments. But I don't know if this is, because we're talking about adjusting memories and limits and stuff, and I don't know if this is something we want to investigate, or if we should just be going straight off custom metrics in the first place, which is probably the smarter move anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot we can do with it. Having said that, like we don't have, like there's a lot of things that are burning and are critical at the moment. And from my time point of view, this is working, right? So we're probably not optimized correctly, and we're probably using too many pods. And the other thing, which is actually related to exactly what you see now with that little turny thing, is I think we're spawning and shutting down pods far too often. And that is actually having a downstream knock-on effect on Thanos when we're trying to get this data, because instead of having like a stable number of pods, we're starting them up, stopping them up. And so there's a massive, you know, if we have a metric that's got 100,000 things, a histogram metric in the application, because it's kind of got too many already, and then we're starting up hundreds of pods, we're multiplying those huge metrics by that stop and start. So actually, you know, this Thanos problem is possibly related to that, but mostly it's a kind of low, to me at least, it's kind of like a low burner problem, not a high priority problem. And yeah, so it's like a nice to have, and it's something we should look at, but it's not pressing. Yeah, I mean, I think we've actually got pretty serious Thanos problems now by the looks, because these are not complicated metrics that I'm looking for here. The second thing that I was going to say is that I am getting dragged in like lots of different directions, and I've been asked to work on this daily stand-up saturation for Petroni. And so that's really kind of taken over my time for the last week. And I haven't been able to make nearly as much progress as I hoped to. But the one thing that I wanted to talk about was I was kind of trying to see if I could shop out some work that is like, there's really no need for me to do it. I don't know if anyone else has got time. But the first one is the GCP quotas. So I think like this is like really important to get done. It would really help with that incident that we had the other day where the autoscalers were unable to autoscale. And there's even some stuff in here. There's several projects that we can use. So Tomasz has got like a custom one, but there are also GCP quota exporter open source projects that we could potentially use. So we just need to decide which one we use, and then we can express that as a custom metric. And really, like if we just stand this up in the monitoring namespace and we set up a service key, like this should be pretty easy to do. And it will get us past that that production incident. And it's something we've also spoken about for a long time, and occasionally it does bite us. And if we put into the saturation framework, we'll have like long-term forecasts, and everything will be hunky-dory. So I was trying to see if I could get someone to bite on that. I'm casting here, doing some fishing. That's the first one.
Well, we can certainly add it to our list, right? We've got a whole list of things of like, what would we like to do in June? So like, I suggest we just add it to that list, right? And then we can pick.
Cool.
Right?
So just to clarify, that would be, sorry. So it's just like a piece of software we could like go into Tanker deployments and just say, deploy this pod, and then just making sure Prometheus
with the
scrapes.
Service key.
Gotcha.
I mean, I don't know if there's so that's the thing. And then Prometheus scrape, and then I can help with setting up the saturation metrics, but that's like 10 lines of JSON, and most of it copied. And then the second one that I've been talking to Google about was and thanks for your help, Graham, was that cluster autoscaling metrics. Google are like, you don't need that, just be like us. And it's just the difference between working with Amazon sometimes and working with Google, but that's a moan for another day. And there was basically what we need to do with this now is we need to get the Stackdriver logs parsed and into a metric, which is not great, but like I think we do need to do it.
And once again, I think there's a Stackdriver exporter, right? So we would just set up that Stackdriver exporter with the query for the logs, and then hopefully we just get Prometheus.
So we've already got Stackdriver's exporter running. So we would add that custom metric to our existing Stackdriver. But the other part is we need to set up the search that basically does the counter bit.
The log-based metric, and we had this set up previously. This will only work for logs that are indexed by Stackdriver, so we can't. I don't think we can exclude them as long as they're showing up in Stackdriver. We can do this.
Yeah, and they're the GKE logs, so they are in. They
should be there.
We can see them there. Yeah. So, I mean, like it would be nice if we could get the scale up events, because in the same way that, like, I think we're scaling up pods too much, we're probably, as a result, also scaling up VMs too much.
Oh, yeah.
So, and so how much time are we spending just initializing? Probably stupendous amounts of time. But with that, it would be really nice if not only the failures, but we got the scale up events on the nodes and the scale down events on the nodes. Those would be nice. And maybe the time between the start, well, I suppose it's not that important with a node because they're pretty generic machines, right? But how long it is before it can start accepting pods. But that's less important.
Oh yeah, that would be interesting as well, actually. Yeah, this is interesting because, as you said, I think we're scaling way too much. When we were looking into the console problem, like we were discovering we were like scaling up and down nodes within like a 10-minute time frame, like a lot, like 5 up, 4 down, like 3 back up. It was It was
Yeah,
crazy, and
yeah,
we
it's-
have no real visibility at the moment. Like I couldn't even tell you when this is happening because we just have no visibility.
Are you
Yeah,
sure that's not due to
it's-
deployments?
I mean, it could be like that. That
No,
totally could
because-
be a thing, but
It's no Java. I mean, you'll see it at like 3 UTC, and you can take any period of time where there's, and I tend to do it outside of deployment times because of that, and it's like 10 up, 12 down, 5 up. It really is all
Okay.
over the show. It's quite surprising to see. And it's like 3 UTC, which I don't think we're going to be doing that many deployments at that time.
Do we have an issue for that already?
It wouldn't be an observability issue. There was a thread about. I'll take it to find that thread where I think Graham and myself and maybe Skarbek were talking about this in the delivery channel, and turn that into an issue if it isn't already, or post the issue if there
Okay,
is.
super, great. Because
it sounds like the issue to capture these log-based metrics would make this clear, though, right? Because we would see, if I'm understanding correctly, at least we would be able to clearly see the number of nodes like going up and down constantly.
Yeah. So we do already have it for. Remember that we do already have it in terms of, well, if we'll ever get the number. So this cube pool max nodes is
true,
that as
yeah.
well. But the other thing to keep in mind is that that's almost like following on from the pod autoscaler, right? Because the first thing that's driving that is the pods and the number of desired, and then obviously that's following. So I think it's more important to, like, I wanted to see if there was a way, like, is there an optimal time, like, that we should be, like, a target, like, if we do a scale up and a scale down in a 1 minute period, or even a 10-minute period because of the initialization time of the Rails code, like, do we want to kind of count that as a poor scaling event and then start treating that as a metric? Like, do you follow? Like, if the lifetime of a pod is less than 10 minutes, then it was probably a bad decision, and then we can start optimizing on that. That would probably, and I think you start with the pods, and then when you fix the pods, the nodes will smooth out as well. Yeah, this is really bad. But I did want to show you that this should be here. So yeah, those the cube Jav, when you've set those up, do you just set them up in the UI, or do you set them up in Terraform? The log exporters.
They need to be set up in Terraform. I don't think the last time
cool.
it did this, it was just a one-off, but we need to do it in Terraform, but it shouldn't be too hard.
Yeah, it's okay, cool. Okay, that's all from me.
Awesome. So those sound like great ideas to add into. We have a great list of possible things to work on. Through June, we'll do a load of like paying down tech debt before we move into the web migration. So I have put together. Yeah, go for it.
Can I just, while we're on the, so Skarbek raised, why don't we just send the web traffic to the API as an option? And I thought about it quite a lot, and I'm not that comfortable with it, but then I started thinking about it a bit more, like, how much extra work is it going to be for the web now that the API is done? It's not that different, right? And that's, I think, where the source of his question is like, we just send the traffic to the API.
Yeah, the thing is like you would think it wouldn't be that different, right? But every migration has been like, oh, this random thing came out. Like, so the thing I will say about web compared to API is, like, API, it's API traffic. It's usually like, it's not things like assets. It's not things like it's more user noticeable quirks. Like if like a content type doesn't get set correctly on a response, and then it doesn't render, and none of this should be an issue, right? Like, this shouldn't be a problem, yet somehow, typically because now we've got so many pieces in the stack, right? You got HA proxy, you got Ingress, Ingress Nginx, and all this other stuff. We just keep finding these gotchas more than anything. I would be interested in maybe like some kind of weird controlled experiment where we like enable send all web traffic to API and pre, and then like run a QA suite or something to start with. Like, I'm not sure if there's an option, maybe not the full option of let's just turn on web traffic into API, but maybe in staging we do it, or and then like let's try it, because either it will go without issue, in which case we're in the same spot we're now, we're not sure, or if we see a clear explosion, then we just know, okay, well then we can't do it. But I don't know.
Again, like
the other thing is that the pods are going to be the same. Like the layout is the same as API, which is the first time that's happening, which is really nice. Like, or maybe with the web service as well, I'm not sure, but it's not like Git's kind of different, and it's got a GitLab shell and everything like that. But
it's not the same.
Web and API are very similar.
But it's not the same though, right? Like you have, if I'm not mistaken, for the web, you also have things like action cable that needs to connect one way or another, and like a couple of those
action cables, WebSockets though, right?
Yeah,
but they're very bad in Kubernetes. Like they're not great
on the web fleet. We're going to enable it on all of the web fleet.
But I would say from an infrastructure, at the infrastructure layer, things are identical between web and API as far as we know right now. Like they are now on VMs. But Andrew, like, are you sure like one of the benefits is, having isolated node pools? I would start with that. Like, do we think that's a benefit or not? If it's not, then then we could just use the same node pool.
So from a node pool point of view, I would definitely argue that it's probably fine to share it, especially because we got the monitoring. That's because I'm less kind of, but definitely from the traffic, I like to separate it. But I mean, maybe then that argument follows through that we should have separate node pools at least. Okay, so at least until we're more comfortable with it.
There are two things. First of all, we have node pools and deployments, right? So we could have the same node pool in two different deployments, which would mean that they would have different like HBA settings, or we could have the same node pool, the same deployment. From a labeling perspective, I'm a little bit worried, like if they share the same node pool, what would the label type be for the nodes?
It could be type equals cube. And
cube.
But we still get alerts on that, right? It's not invisible. It's just that effectively it'll say that the web and API node pool of the kube service is saturated.
But right? We also have a separate node pool for Git HTTPS. So then what would the type label be for that? It wouldn't be kube.
So
Git,
with,
right?
No, it's Git, because it's specific. So we can basically do either. But for the ones that don't have a common service, we just put them as the kube service.
So I think the separate node pool is cheap. Like, I don't think that is a lot of overhead for us. I think the expensive thing about these migrations are really configuration and making sure that we have all of the environment variables and config in place. So I don't think there is much overhead for creating a separate node pool and a separate deployment. Personally,
and it's
like
also like at the moment it's just less cognitive overhead, because it's like everything's got its own node pool, and so it's one less thing for people to think about. And I think in the future world we'll probably share node pools more, but like let's just keep it the same for now, and then it's one less thing to juggle during an incident. It's like API's got a node pool, web's got a node pool.
Yeah, and also one more thing to add is on at the HA proxy layer, we separate out API and web traffic. If we were to combine them into the same deployment, then we would have a single Nginx ingress, and we would have to collapse those two services into one, which may be a good thing.
Yeah, so that's what Skarbek was asking on the thread when he asked about it. And my take is that I don't think we should do that yet. And for one, the automated traffic that goes to the API, we need a way of kind of separating it from. And particularly because the biggest part of the traffic on the API at the moment is API v4 jobs request. And there's a part of that, which is BigQuery, which is super sketchy and blows up all the time. And people, if you get delays on the API, people don't generally notice it. But if that's causing Puma saturation on the web, that'll be bad. And at least until that situation's calmed down, I think we should just keep them separate.
So another point which is slightly confusing, this is an issue that we were discussing as part of this next month of tech debt as well, is like I'm not sure if we want to even keep Ingress Nginx involved for this. Like, basically what we discovered when we migrated IPA is keeping Ingress Nginx. We kept it around because there's like some settings we have for proxy buffering and stuff, but I'm of the opinion that this is either important enough that we need to move it up the stack into HA proxy or move it down the stack into like Workhorse or the application or something. Like, basically we can't rely on Ingress Nginx to do any functionality for us that's outside the specification of the Kubernetes Ingress, which is pure traffic routing. And that's what our HA proxy layer does. So we shouldn't, technically speaking, we shouldn't really be using Ingress Nginx at all, because HA proxy is our Ingress technology routing piece. But we've kind of like jammed it in there just for API because we have these settings which we had to have. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, I would like to see that, like, that could drive the decision a little bit as well, or maybe not, I don't know. But even if we have separate API and separate web pods, if they're running under, like, at the moment, we don't deploy multiple Ingress Nginx anyway. And even if you specify multiple Ingress objects, they're all being run by the same set of pods, which is how Ingress Nginx works, good or for bad. So, like, either way, we're tying into the one Ingress Nginx if we keep it around. If we get rid of it, then, you know, we control things at HA proxy layer. But that's kind of orthogonal to this whole discussion, I guess. But it's another point I would like to see further understood before maybe we make the decision for web and API. But it sounds like
HA proxy Nginx evaluated, or because I don't really know the state of it, but sorry, the HA proxy Ingress. Was that evaluated as part of this process?
No, so I think there's two parts here. This is how I'm personally thinking of it, is, as I said, we were happy to not keep Ingress Nginx at all. We just remove Nginx out, but then we discovered a problem. So we're like, oh, we have to add it back in, and we have to put a bunch of random settings for different URL paths as well, like proxy buffering here, not here, and all this stuff. And so when we did that, it caused us a bunch of tech debt, because now we're really hacking. We're basically relying on a bunch of, not hacks, but like bad configuration data to wedge Ingress Nginx to do what we want. But the thing is I want to identify what problem that configuration is solving. Why does it need to be there? And if it's something that every single GitLab installation needs, then it should go into the GitLab installation, because Ingress Nginx is not technically part. It's just implements the Ingress spec. You could use GKE Ingress, you could use Amazon's Ingress, you could use anything you wanted with the GitLab chart, and it's supposed to work. But if we're saying these are configuration settings GitLab needs to work, then we shouldn't just be relying on the fact that you're using Ingress Nginx to have them. And so either they need to go into the application further somehow, or if we are like, no, we need them, but the only reason we need them is because we've got HA proxy, or because we're using Ingress Nginx. And if you use anything else, you don't need them, then you should push it into the Ingress layer, which for us at the moment is HA proxy. Then later on, probably after web migration, I would like to treat HA proxy as another service to be migrated. We sit down, we talk about what are the requirements, what does it do? And then we could go through all the options. Ingress HA proxy. There's the Nginx themselves, the company make a different Nginx Ingress that's actually much better, but you got to pay for it. There's GKE Ingress. There's Envoy proxy, which is also a content. Like, there's so many different things we can choose, but we can like sit down at that point and like, what's the future of HA proxy VMs? How do we want to handle that? But for the moment, I would love to get rid of Ingress.
But that layer is outside of like the application, and it's like GitLab.com kind of our requirements.
I mean, it's not isolated though. It's not fully isolated from the application necessarily, because if you're talking about, like what do people need to have in order to use GitLab, it is part of the application. But you're right in the fact, not HA proxy, yeah. Right?
That's what I was referring to.
I fully agree with Graham here that HA proxy / Nginx could be like the next service after we migrate. Folks, just keep the eye on the ball, right? Like, we need to make as minimum possible changes between the application that we currently have and the application in the new environment in order to be sure that we can function, right? We can address technical debt, like we are making room to address some of these technical debt. And if that means we are going to prolong some of the migrations, will prolong some of the migrations. We just need to be safe, and we need to also think about how this is going to relate to customers later on, right? Because it doesn't even have to be external customers. We will now have internal customers that will have to leverage this whole thing that was built, right? So eye on the ball, one step at a time, and we'll get there, right?
So Graham, like on that, like I think the main reason we're doing it is for the proxy buffering, right?
Yeah, so yeah, sure.
So with that, if we could move that into Workhorse, and Workhorse knows all of these routes, right? And it knows which ones need buffering, which ones don't. And it's like, it is a really good place for it. And then it could also have like potential, like, you know, because we have Nginx that ships with Omnibus, and it's always like kind of this like unloved stepchild of Omnibus. You know, it doesn't
That's
have
my suggestion. Yeah, I'm
and,
absolutely on board with that. If you can convince people to like do the work in Workhorse, perfect. Because yeah,
if we gathering the comments, it's just the proxy buffering, right? No, but
that's the problem, Andrew, right? Like Workhorse started as a completely different type of project, right? Like it was an Nginx wannabe, but never really fully there, right? And no one owns Workhorse, so it's currently like maintained by a couple of volunteers. So this is something we could drive on.
I could put together. Look, I mean, you started with an issue, right? And then there's a lot of benefits.
Right?
We got an issue.
Graham's got an issue, and it's got the options. It looked to me like that some of these are kind of like maybe short term, and we should look at what we need to do for web. And some of them are long term. Like the Workhorse one is probably the long term, right? Like at some point, yes, let's get it into the application. It's not going to happen this month, right? Like there's no way that we're going to get
I do agree that
before the web.
I guess. For that issue, and I still need to go back and write that up. I'll do tomorrow. I'll do that tomorrow. As in, I need to clean that issue up.
Do it Monday.
I'll do it. I spent just 1 hour, and I'll do it tomorrow morning. That's fine. But I think what I would like to do, maybe I need to rephrase that issue. Then we need a plan. I'm okay if we don't have the solution, but I'd like to understand what the plan is, or even, and it doesn't even have to be us. Like, you know, Andrew's right. Like if we can convince people, yeah, actually this should go into Workhorse and they're going to do it by 14 point whatever, 0.6 or whatever, that's good enough. I just want to know the plan, I guess. I think that's important. And going back to what you were saying, Java, about configuration, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, for enabling API, so kind of walking back up this conversation thread, enabling API, like in terms of like actually turning it on, like let's turn it on in the Helm chart. It should be like a few lines of code, right? Like I think the dragging out of these things never seems to be creating the node pools, doing the deployment. I think we could probably whip that up in under a week. So then it's like, well, if it's only going to be a week of work to do this whole separate deployment, is it still worth? I feel like maybe it is worth then still keeping the separation because it's not that difficult to keep separated. But I could be convinced otherwise.
I think it's worth keeping a separation for monitoring for now, just because we have, we want to keep parity between the VMs and Kubernetes as far as monitoring is concerned. And we want to use our existing, like the work that we did to have like, you know, labels and everything. Like, I just feel like it's going to be simpler if we just have a separate node pool, separate deployment.
Okay, I know Scott Beck was just thinking of, would it save us a load of work? It sounds like no, it potentially
I don't think so.
Some new complexity. So let's stick with the current plan. Just before we wrap up, because we are out of time, I just wanted to mention about planning the tech debt for June. So thank you, Henry, Graham, for a bunch of adding your ideas for this. I've moved everything into a spreadsheet. I want to just share it here because it's not exclusively for just the three of you to look through. So Jav, Andrew, Maren, like if you want to also take part in adding comments and things here, please do. The idea is just to go through the ideas and have a think about like which ones do we think were most like enjoyable, like most fun to do, which ones are going to help us towards web migration, and just try and see if we can actually bubble up the most valuable ones that we can focus on in June. I do want to make sure that in June we actually come out of this feeling like, great, we achieved some stuff, we have less tech debt, and we're in a better place for the web migration. So we definitely won't manage to do everything. Some of these things like are just too big, or they fit better after the web, and it's not a one-time tech debt pay down, right? So we can prioritize those later. And then the idea is if we could get sort of our ranked list of ideas that we'd like to tackle for next Wednesday. So if everyone completes before Wednesday, then we can actually go through and actually make a decision, like which stuff do we actually start working on. Awesome. Thanks very much for the discussion, everyone, and the demo, Andrew. I hope you all have a good rest of your Thursday.
Bye.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Good to talk to you all. See you later.
You too.